Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kalia Garrido, and I'm the founder of Healthy Women Leaders. Healthy Women Leaders is a collective of women that are in leadership who choose to unapologetically focus on their own health and well-being in order to develop their personal power. And our mission is to create space to highlight people and ideas that champion healthy living and radical self-care as a critical means to thriving in our crazy world. This video series is designed to highlight women who have unlocked a truth for themselves that can be inspirational or educational or encourage other people to live better lives. And today we are going to talk to Holly Priestley about deliberate and intentional living. So a little bit about this woman sitting here with me. Holly is a freelance writer, a content creator, a photographer, podcaster, strategist, and coach, also dog mom. Also, all these other things, which we'll get into. And she has spent the last 3 years living in her 1997, sounds very vintage, Ford E350 van with her dog as they have traveled around the United States. Her most recent adventure is home ownership, as she's just parked up that iconic van in front of her new home in Arizona. And in her podcast, Deliberate Living, she creates inspiring content for people who want to live authentic lives, whether that means starting your own business, moving into a van and traveling around the United States, or really anything in between. She explores the different ways that people choose to ditch what she calls the prescribed life in order to find life lived on their own terms. And this can be freedom and happiness, really however they choose. And so that just jazzes me up, Holly. I'm excited to talk to you about that today. So thank you for being here with me.
Thank you. You can do my intros at like any dinner party or any social event I have to go to.
I love it. I do that sometimes now. I'm like, hey, let me use my radio voice. I think in a different world, I would have liked to have been a radio host. Because instead of just the working from home where you never have to get dressed from like the the bottom down, you never have to get dressed ever. And that's just it.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You're a radio host. I would love it. Okay. All right. So as I was doing some of my listening to your podcast and just kind of I've been following your journey all along because you and I have known each other for a couple of years, like before, you got on the road.
Yeah, before the van.
It was before the van and before the pan, right? There was a lot of things have happened meanwhile since you've been doing it. Yes. So tell me a little bit more about this prescribed life, because I hear you mention it in a lot of your podcasts. You talk about what is this prescribed life?
In a nutshell, the prescribed life is that notion that you go to college and get a diploma, or go to high school, get a diploma, go to college, get a degree, go get a job working for somebody else Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 salaried benefited cubicle. You get a house with a white picket fence, like one partner of the opposite sex. You have 2.3 kids and a golden retriever. And like, that is your life. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But so many of us don't want to do that, but we also don't necessarily know that there's other options out there. Right. So like the prescription is that plan. And I also love how you just ran through that as like, so now if I'm going to do your intros, you're going to do like my fine print at the end, because that was very articulate and super speedy. But that's what it can feel like as you're living your life. And especially as we start to get older and time picks up speed, and it's like these are all the things. And sometimes I wonder, like, what is all this rushing for? You rush through all of those steps and really you're just kind of rushing to the grave, not to make it like super dark, but that's kind of you're just rushing for that next, like the next thing that you're supposed to accomplish, the next thing that you're supposed to achieve. And like, when I get this thing, then I'll be happy. When I get my diploma, I'll be happy. When I get my degree, I'll be happy. When I get my job, when I get the raise, when I get the girl or the guy, or when I have a kid, or, whatever, then I'm going to be happy. But then as soon as you have that, there's something else.
Right. And so this, I wonder, like, so I'm totally bought on to that whole notion of the prescribed life. And I just wonder, do you think that there was ever like a purpose for this? Like, how did we get here?
I believe that people do the best they can with what they have. And so I do believe that at some point there was like benefits or perceived benefits of it. I mean, if you look at like American history or like the Industrial Revolution, right? Like all of these, a lot of things were invented to make life easier, right? Like a vacuum cleaner was invented so that women specifically could clean their houses a lot more quickly, and then they would have more free time to spend with their family. But no, they just have more chores. Instead of giving us less chores and more time, we just gave ourselves like more efficient ways to do more chores. And dishwashers were the same way, and like computers and phones and like all of these things were meant to improve life. And like by and large, our quality of life in the 2020s is way better than our quality of life in the 1820s or the 1920s. But it's also kind of come at a cost. Like our sense of community is a lot less, like pandemic aside. And so I do think that there was some kind of goal, right? When our parents were our age, they were taught, if you go to college and you get a degree, then you can get a well-paying job anywhere. And it was kind of a security blanket to have that.
Right.
And that was not true by the time I was in college, and definitely not by the time I graduated.
Right.
It's certainly not true now, and for the people who are in college now and next. But like they tried, right? For them, it was a truth. For us, it's not a truth. So they tried to lead us on a right path that would give us more security. And it turns out that it didn't do that.
Right. I mean, you're dead on, especially like college is a perfect example, or like it's a perfect example of the prescribed life that everybody has to follow this exact path. For our parents, maybe that made sense, but now look at the cost look at the cost, look at inflation and how everything is happening. So now there are, of course, a few, there's professions that you do need your college degree for, but prescribing that for everybody is where it falls apart for me, because it's not for everybody, and everybody will walk away with a huge amount of debt, or their, if their parents are able to pay whatever their financial situation is. That is just one example of some of these archaic or older systems that are in place that I think are really due for a revamping. And that's why it's so exciting to talk to somebody like you, who's sort of made her own path along, as she's gone. So speaking of that, in intentionally and deliberately making your own path, tell me a little bit more about what deliberate living means to you.
The concept of, deliberate living is just, man, I want to strike just from my vocabulary and I can't do it. The concept of deliberate living is primarily focused on being mindful of the decisions that you're making and how you're living, and being aware and doing things because you want to be doing them, because they fuel you, or at least knowing why you're doing them, rather than just going through life on autopilot and not really thinking about it. Like, oh, I'm going to college because that's what you're supposed to do. I'm going to work for this company because that's what you're supposed to do. Like, I'm sure you run across this all the time. I know I do. When you talk to somebody, hey, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while. What's new? Like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Like, and that's the default response. And also in some cultures, like the hustle and grind culture that I was a part of a few years ago, like it's worn as a badge of honor too, right? Like, oh man, I am just so busy. I am exhausted. I just work so much. Right. And there's definitely a subculture in America, especially in the startup world or in the entrepreneurial world, which is where we met, where that's like a good, awesome, wonderful thing to do. And for me, living more deliberately is like, why am I so busy all the time? Am I busy doing the things that I want to be doing? Like, I like being busy. I like having things going on. I like making things. I like creating things. I like producing things. I like, going on hikes or runs, or, I like being active, but I wanted to be more like, am I spending my time and my energy doing the things that I want to be doing? Right. Am I pursuing a lifestyle that I want to be living? And so that's kind of what deliberate living is living on purpose rather than on auto.
Right. Yep. And so some of what you've discussed just now is these questions that you're asking yourself. And before we press record on this video, we were talking about how a lot of people go through, and you even just mentioned, you go through life on autopilot and you don't know how to start to get in touch with yourself. And I feel like living, taking the step to live, minimalize your entire life, let go of your apartment, move into a van and start driving around. That sounds like that must have encouraged you to really start listening to yourself at a deep level. Number one, you had to hear that voice that told you that this would be likely a good thing for you to do. But then also, like, when you're out there, kind of talk to me a little bit more about how is it to hear that voice initially to get you on the road, and then when you're out there?
Oh man. I first found out that people could choose on purpose to live in vehicles when I was 21 or something. I went to a rock climbing competition, and the Venn diagram of rock climbers and vehicle dwellers is almost a perfect circle. There are so many rock climbers who choose to live in their cars. So that's kind of where I was first introduced to it. And I met a guy who had been living in his sedan with his husky for like 10 years. And I was like, it was mind blowing. I was like, wait a minute. You're choosing to do this. You're living a good life. You're happy. You're healthy. You're happy. You're healthy. Interesting. Huh. Yeah. Those two things sound nice. Huh. And then I was like, all right, cool. That's something that I want to do. And I just kind of like tucked it in the back of my brain. And every couple of months, every year or so, for the next like 6 or 7 years, I would revive the idea. I want to live in a car. I want to live in a van. And then I would do a ton of research, and I would go test drive cars, and I would start, minimizing and getting rid of my belongings. And right before I made the final leap of like actually moving into a vehicle, something in life would make it quote unquote inconvenient to live in a car. I'd get a new job or a new partner or like something like that. And I would be like, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and I'll save the car for later. Yeah. And then in December of 2017, I was looking ahead at my goals for 2018. And I was like, girl, this has got to be the year. Like, do it or don't. And if you don't do it, that's fine. But it's taking up space on the list of things that you want to do in life. And so it needs to get off the list somehow. Like, you either need to do it this year, or just admit defeat that you don't want to do it. And like, that's fine. You don't have to want to do it. So then I started test driving vans in January, and I bought mine in August, and I spent 6 months tearing it apart and putting it back together. And I moved in on January 1st of 2019. Wow. Because I was just like, shit or get off the pot, like do it or don't. And I was fully accepting of myself if I didn't like it, but I also didn't give myself a get out of jail free card. Like I didn't put stuff in storage. I didn't like have my apartment's worth of things like waiting for me somewhere. I got rid of everything and I went full send into the van. But mentally I was like, if I don't like this after a month or 2 or 3, like I can always just move back into an apartment. It's not a big deal, but I have to try. Right. And then it turned out that like it absolutely worked for me. I 100% loved it, and I did it for 3 years. And if I had known that I was going to do it for 3 years, I would have done it differently. So I'm glad I didn't. Because it worked out the way it was supposed to.
Right. And that's exactly how it is. I'm so akin to you in the fact that I don't know if bored is the right word or frustrated, but if I have something that I want to do that's like tickling my brain, I feel like I have a limited amount of times where I can tell people like, I'm so interested in van life. I really think that could be for me. I'm doing all this research. Like I really want to do it. I feel like I can't tell that same thing to X amount of people before I'm like, are you going to do it or what? Like, what are we waiting for? And I think that's a key thing. And I love how you gave yourself, you were like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to try it. I'm going to be all in, but I'll also give myself the freedom. If it doesn't work out, then we go and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, that that integrity was there for me. And it was, if I say I've been saying that I want to live out of a van for, 5, 6, 7 years, and I keep not doing it. Like, what kind of person am I?
Yeah.
Who am I for like saying something and not doing it? Like, that's not who I am. Either stop talking about it or do the thing. Yes. And so, I mean, that's a huge motivator for me. Like, one of my core values is living in integrity with myself. And so I try to be very careful with my words so that I don't say things I don't mean. Because I definitely used to do that in a previous life as a much bigger people pleaser than I am now. But I mean, the same thing. Like, if I say I'm going to live in a van or I want to live in a van, like, fucking do it.
I have to do it. Right. That's what we're here to do. Don't you think? I mean, like, this is what we're here to do. This is our beautiful playground is life. And we're here to grow and experience. And, I've followed you for a while. Like, you had super long hair when I first met you, cut it all off, like publicly, fine, gone. You were living in an apartment. Now you're like, I'm going to live in a van. And now you've just purchased a house. You started a business, you started a podcast. Like, you are, and you have broken away from that prescribed life. It seems like you've given yourself a little bit of freedom and flexibility, and you're okay with these big changes. But we know that that is hugely difficult for a lot of people. Human beings are incredibly resistant to change. And I think that, a lot of times they think, well, this isn't perfect. I don't feel right going to my job every day. I don't like wearing my busy as a badge of honor, but this is what I know. This is like my cards. And that's how I'm dealing them, or I'm playing them. So like, how can somebody push themselves beyond that feeling of like, this is what I know, it's my known quantity, it's better than the unknown? What advice would you give to somebody who's like maybe on the edge of a big decision?
Yeah, I think that's huge. Like, the uncomfortable known is better than the potentially way more comfortable unknown, just because it's unknown. Right. And there's like a popular analogy that if you put a frog in room temperature water and you slowly heat it up, it will stay in the water and it will die. But if you put a frog in boiling water, it'll jump out.
Yeah.
I don't think that's actually true. And I'm pretty sure scientists can't do studies like that because someone would get mad, as they should. But you're the frog. Like, you're the frog. And so I would say one thing that I get told pretty frequently, especially about the van, is, oh man, like, that's awesome. I love what you're doing. I could never do what you do. And like, I always get like, I know that it's meant like kind of as a compliment, but like, I don't really take it that way. Because I take it as like a personal excuse or a lie. Like, I don't think like living in a van is like, it works for me. It's not for everybody. I am definitely not like your hashtag van life, hashtag blessed content creator, right? Like, I don't live in a bikini all day by the beach. Like, that's not my life. And I feel like van life definitely has like an image sometimes. But it's friggin' hard to live in a van. And so I don't think that everybody should do it. And also, like, I don't think that I'm doing anything special by doing it or by having done it. Like, I'm not unique. Like, there's nothing about me that is like, oh, nobody else can do this, only I get, like, no, you could live in a van with your family. Like, so many people live. I bought my van from a family with like 3 kids. Like, people can do it. But it's also okay if you don't want to. And I think knowing who you are and what you want is really important. But in terms of your actual question, like, for people who are kind of teetering on a big decision and feeling unnerved by the potential change, I would say, like, know yourself. So know whether like taking small steps or leaping all in is like what works for you. But if you're truly nervous about it, but it's the right thing, like, start small. Like one step. If you don't know how to get to point B from where you are, take step 8.1 and then 8.2 and then 8.3 and like just figure it out. And eventually the momentum will get you there. And if you just start small, sometimes that rock rolling down the hill will just take itself, and you're just along for the ride at some point and you're like, oh shit, I'm doing this.
Here we go.
But a lot of it does come down to like following your intuition and following your gut. Like, does this feel right? Or am I doing this because somebody else told me I should?
Or because it looks good when you look at
it looks good.
Hashtag van life. I also want to wake up at the beach every day, but so okay, so you mentioned knowing yourself, and that is so key. At Healthy Women Leaders, we oftentimes talk about the 5 core pillars of whole life self-care, and the number one thing is know yourself. You have to be able to know yourself to know what's right for you and what's not right for you. But when we live these prescribed lives without doing any of the intentional or deliberate work to really figure out who you are, people really don't even know how to hear that guidance, from within. I was asking you before we started recording, like, so what was the catalyst that made you want to now put down roots and sort of stay in one place and make another big change in your life? And you said that it was being able to hear and feel what your internal guidance system was telling you, which was that when you were passing through Arizona, like, you're home, like, this is where you need to be. And I truly believe that if more of us could tap into that internal guidance system, we would be much better off as as a society. So do you have any, what's step one of being able to listen to your internal guidance?
Oh man, this is fun because I think it's hard easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's what is it? Simple but not easy.
Yeah.
Simple is not always easy. I think that if you make a game out of it, you can really learn how to communicate with your intuition, your inner guidance, your soul, whatever word you want to use for it. Martha, I don't know. You can call it whatever you want. But if you there is an energy source in all of us that knows things that we don't know, that is tapped into things we can't even imagine. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a little woo, but
I love it.
If you're here for like tactical steps, I would make a game out of it. Make it fun. If you ever feel a pull towards something, go with it. Fucking go with it. Let it happen. Yeah. If you want to learn how to talk to yourself, make little games for yourself. I personally am a huge fan of flipping a coin when I don't know what to do with myself. Yeah. Like last week, I had to buy a couch. I haven't bought a couch in years. And there were two couches that I liked. One of them was like absolutely everything I wanted, but it was a white couch and I have two dogs. Mm-hmm. So that was probably a bad idea. And then one of them was like pretty cool, probably more durable, better for the dogs. And I didn't know like what to do. And I flipped a coin and the coin told me which couch to get. And that's the couch I got. Yeah. And I have some friends, one of my friends was with me when I did this, and it stresses her out that I trust my life to coins. But so I do it in part because if I truly don't know, if I'm very 50-50 on which couch to get, and like this is not a life-changing decision, right? It's not like, do I live in Arizona or do I move to Thailand, right? Like that, I might not trust a coin with something like that at first. Right. But if something is like inconsequential, like, do I want the vanilla ice cream or the chocolate ice cream? Start really small, flip a coin, trust the coin, do what the coin says. Or as it's in the air, you know what you want it to be. Right. And then you go with that.
I love that. That's it, right? Because you're leaving it up to chance. You're flipping it and you're like, I really want the chocolate.
Yeah. And if I flip a coin and I get that response, then it doesn't matter what the coin says. Yeah. But if I truly don't care or I don't know and I just want to trust the universe to like treat me well, I'll flip a coin and I'll let the coin do the thing. Another thing you can do is like talk to your body. You can really embody yourself and like get out of your head and like drop into your core, drop in, some people feel it more in their chest. I feel it really strongly in my gut. Some people let their hands choose. Like if you're driving and you like, should I take a left or should I take a right? And you're like, again, not a super huge decision, but like you're driving around town. Like, do you want to go to the grocery store the back way or the front way? Right. Like let your hands choose. And maybe you'll end up someplace that, you didn't know existed in your own town that maybe you've lived for 20 years. Maybe there's a new mural. Maybe your friend is out there and like you didn't know and you just got to like see them for the first time. Like trust small decisions first. And as you start getting in touch with your intuition more, like up the ante and like let it make bigger decisions for you. And like loosen your grip on having to know everything before you do it. Loosen your grip on having to know the outcome, loosen your grip on having to know the how or the why, and just trust that this thing in you, out of you, has your best interests in mind, the way that you would like trust a parent to take care of you. Yep.
I love that. I think that it's being open. What you've just described is really being open, being open to what could happen, kind of taking, like we talked a lot about, directing yourself, having your hands on the wheel, just like, emotionally or maybe mentally, like taking your hands off the wheel, not physically, because that wouldn't be safe, but like, being okay with either thing. And in my life, one of the things that was integral for me to be able to really start to tap into the guidance was letting go of busy as a badge of honor. Right. Yeah. And building a career and working in corporate, working in startup life or whatever, like I wrote 200 emails today. Like I did all this stuff, I did this. I found myself rushing from thing to thing in my life, just, in years will slip by like that. So as soon as you release that and you embrace a pause and you allow yourself time to take a pause, that's when you can start to hear those things. And I love what you've given as the guidance system for kind of being able to make smaller choices and seeing how that goes. Another thing that I've always found in my life is when it comes to a very big decision, it never happens for me in an emotional moment, right? Let's say I have a terrible day at work. I got into a huge thing. I hated it. It sucked. And I was like, oh, this is the worst. Like, that's not for me where decisions ever would get made, when there's an emotional, because you're not embracing the pause. You're not having a quiet moment. For me, it would always be like a week or 2 weeks later when it was like, I think we're done here. Just this little quiet voice. I think we're all set. And you're like, oh my God, now I have to change my life to like fit what this little voice said. So if you can get away from the emotion, embrace into the pause, be open, like you said, the guidance is there. And I think that's so rad. Okay. So 3 years in van life, like what are some of your key takeaways that you could share with us? Like, so, for example, there's a lot of people that will want to go and do that. And I think there's other people that, like somebody like me, I want to learn from you, girl. I know it's not for me. I know it's not. But I love it. And I'm interested in what you could learn by decoupling yourself from the prescribed life and like figuring out your truth. So what are some of the key takeaways?
Yeah. When people ask me what my favorite part of van life is or was, they want me to say, I had the freedom to go anywhere. I woke up in a lot of beautiful places. I got to go on so many adventures. And like, that was cool. I'm not going to lie. Right. But I woke up in parking lots as much or more than I woke up in beautiful places. So, it's not everything. For me, the number one thing that came out of van life for me was an ever increasing well of self-capability and self-empowerment, and like just a sense of I got this. Yeah. I was faced with a lot of brand new decisions I had never had to make before, or, brand new situations that I had never found myself in before. And when you're doing something like that, especially by yourself, you don't have another partner, you're traveling alone most of the time, like you got to figure shit out. And, one of the things that I got asked and still get asked all the time is, questions about safety. And I think part of it is being a female, and like people are always worried about women's safety, which is a whole nother topic. But, people would ask, like, what if you're on some like remote back road with no service and like something happens to the van? Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? And I didn't know how I was going to handle it. And then one day I was on a remote back dirt road away from cell service and everything else. And I got a flat tire and I had to figure out how to change it. And the hardest part, honestly, was figuring out how to get my spare off the bottom of the van. Would recommend knowing how to do that before the situation arises. But yeah, so it was one, like, it didn't happen. It didn't always have to be a big thing like that. It could just have been something small. The first few days that I lived in the van were in like negative and single digit temperatures. And that was a challenge. Like it was me and it was my dog. And like, I couldn't even make a hot water bottle. I couldn't even make tea because I couldn't get the water out of the jug because the jug was frozen. Like her water bowl was frozen. Everything was frozen. I couldn't warm up. There was nothing we could do like in that situation. So it could be like really tiny things, and the solution is like, well, I was going to drive 6 hours today, but it turns out I'm driving 14 so that I can get somewhere where the temperatures are in the double digits. Right. And let me tell you what, the difference between 3 degrees and 14 degrees is balmy. Yeah. Balmy when you're living in a van.
Free. I get it. We live in Colorado, so we get some big weather swings, but within a home. But like, yes, it's all relative.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the number one thing is just okay, I can handle whatever the world throws at me. Like I bought a 110-year-old house and like I have been doing house projects and like living in the van was like, this thing broke, or I want to add a shelf, or how do I fix this? And you figure it out because you don't really have a choice. And then the house is like, oh yeah, well, I want to change this. And like, I have so much more just confidence that I can do the things that I want to do. Yeah. It's your own well of like empowerment. Like you can figure stuff
out. And I mean, there's such a great lesson in that. Like we talked about being a female out on the road and how that's like kind of scary in itself, or just women's safety in general. And then, but also women doing stuff like this, adding your own shelf, doing different things. Like this is great. It's another break from the prescribed living where you're like, I better call the handyman to get that done. You're like, no, I'll do that myself.
But like you don't have to do anything huge either. Like you don't have to move into a van to like get self-empowerment. I started that journey a few years before I moved into the van. I had such crippling social anxiety that like I couldn't even go to the grocery store alone. Like I could not function in society basically. Like especially if I was alone. I needed a buddy. I needed an emotional support human at all times, which wreaks havoc on your friendships and romantic relationships. But then I was like, I have to learn how to fucking deal. Like I need to be able to go to the grocery store alone. And so for me, it started really small. I would take my dog and she would be in the car waiting in the parking lot for me. And that helped. Like, all right, I've got somebody in the car waiting for me. I can't take her in the store, but like she'll be there when I get out. And I would put in headphones so I could listen to music and like just be in my own zone and not be so stressed about like all the sensory input coming at me from the grocery store. I seriously, like I had to start so small. And if you had been like, you're going to go live in a van all by yourself, like out in the desert, out in the woods, like doing things all on your own, like away from society and away from people and doing whatever, I'd be like, okay, sure.
Never. Yeah. Wow.
That's why I started really small. And then it got bigger. So it wasn't like overnight. Like I didn't become who I am today overnight.
Yeah.
It's taken me 30 some odd years.
And when you tell it like that you had crippling social anxiety, like to that point of really trying to like loop in a teammate to like go to the grocery store with you, hearing that is startling based on the girl that I'm talking to today. And basically,
well, and you met me kind of in like after I had worked on that process. Like we met at like a women's entrepreneur. And I went to that alone.
Yeah, I remember that.
I had been working on it.
You told me like, oh, this is unusual for me. I wouldn't normally do this. So hats off to you, girl. Look at what you're doing. That's amazing.
So I don't want somebody to like listen to this and be like, oh, well, I have to only do giant things. I have to move across the country. I have to start a new business. I have to move into a van. Like it doesn't have to be it can be, right? Like huge life-changing decisions can definitely put fuel on the fire and make you like trial by fire for sure. Like you have to fucking figure shit out like in a big way. But if that's not your personality, if you can't dive into the deep end first thing and that gives you even more, start small today. Like go for a walk alone, go sit in a coffee shop alone. Like start tiny.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it really like brings it all together when you talk about that, having that huge of a journey in kind of going through that, because I think what you're saying is true. I think there's a lot of people who can't or won't be making a huge change to their lifestyle. They're not going to move to another country. They're not going to, live in a van and travel around. Like figuring out by knowing yourself, what is the next challenge thing that you should do, and just kind of taking that step and figuring things out for yourself. I think that's really important on the path to growth. And again, like that's what we're here to do, is to.
And you're not always going to get it right. You're going to mess up.
Right.
You're going to think you're following your intuition and like something's going to happen. You're like, well, that wasn't how I expected that to go. And that's fine too.
Yeah. And having some forgiveness for yourself. Like we're not, I will expect perfection from you when I am a perfect person, and that will never happen. Like earth suit, I'm wearing the earth suit. I'm a human being. This is like, we're all fumbling around trying to do stuff, but I just love your trajectory of growth. So my last question for you is, like, in your podcast, you talk a lot about freedom. Like you're breaking up freedom into different categories, and you're really kind of diving deep into freedom. So what does freedom mean for you?
Freedom as like its own single concept is the ability to make choices, I think, and to spend your time and your energy in ways that are fulfilling for you. On the show, I break down like the main freedom motivators based on what I've seen with my clients and, through all of my work, the freedom of location, the freedom of time, the freedom of finances, and the freedom of creativity, or the freedom of energy. And it's kind of like the 5 love languages, right? Like everybody wants all of them. Everybody has all of them to some extent, but 1 or 2 are usually the most motivating for somebody. And you can focus on finding freedom in that one way first, that is, the most motivating or the most exciting for you. But what they all come down to ultimately is being able to live your life in such a way that it is authentic to you, that you get to make the decisions that you want to make, surrounding the things that you want to make. It is fulfilling, and you are being deliberate and authentic about it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I feel like, to encapsulate it all, it's like totally ditch the prescribed life or don't, but like do what's authentic to you. Like
if you want a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 cubicle salaried benefited position with a house and a white picket fence and a golden retriever and 2.3 kids, fucking do it. Yeah. If that's what you want, go for it.
That's your choice. But if it's not right for you, then you have to learn how to listen to what your inner guidance is telling you, and then make the small incremental changes or the huge drastic ones to get closer to where you want to be. Because I truly believe that if more people were living life as in an authentic way to themselves, we would be in a better place as a society of human beings that are kind of fumbling around.
And I don't think that it's something that, we're taught ever. I think that especially parents have a really unique opportunity to teach the next generations that they have the freedom to choose what they want to do with their lives, that they can trust their own decision making, that they can trust themselves, they can trust their gut. And, my folks did everything that they could for me and my brothers. Like they did the absolute best that they could. And that doesn't mean that like it couldn't have been done better in some way. It doesn't mean that we couldn't have learned more, right? Like we have a prescribed life for a reason, like we talked about at the top of the call. Like I'm sure that it benefited, and everybody has good intentions and, that sort of thing, except corporations, but we're not going to that. Right. But I think that, we need to be having these conversations more with our peers, with our family, with our friends, with our coworkers, with our parents, with people older than us, people younger than us. And the more we can share these stories, that's why I started my show 2 years ago, was because I just wanted to share all the ways people could live deliberately alternative lifestyles, because I feel like I've been exposed to it in ways other people haven't. And it still took me 20 years to learn that you could live in a car on purpose. Like that was always like a different thing.
You can only teach your children or have those conversations with people to your own level of wokeness, right? Until you understand that there's alternative ways to be, or that you should be on this deep, kind of soul search mission to figure out who you truly are, and so that you get closer to saying yes to the right things and no to the wrong thing for you. You only are allowed to share that at the level that you've found for yourself. And so I think that it's kudos to you for holding the space to have those conversations, because now, we talked about the double-edged sword of the internet, but information travels fast and people can go and seek out what they want, but you've got to there's a lot of unlearning that needs to do. I think we do a fantastic job of teaching that prescribed life, you know, and as a parent myself, it's, you could look at the difference between my 2 children, my older son and my younger daughter, and the personal growth that I did between them, and the difference in how I talk to those children when they were at the same age is immense. You've got to do the work, and you've got to try to figure yourself out so that you can open the doorway for them to do the same thing. Because if not, we're just head down on that kind of march towards retirement, and then whatever comes after that.
Yeah. And we might as well enjoy life every day rather than hold off for some imaginary world of retirement where things are easy all of a sudden. No, that's, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a millennial, but like, I don't really believe in retirement. I am not going to rely on Social Security. Like, I am going to take care of myself.
Yeah. And what's the wait? Like, what are you postponing joy anyway? You want to wait to like,
don't postpone joy.
Do now. Do the thing you want to do now. And I think living in a van, like, minimalizing sort of your whole existence, that will free up finances. And that's one of the big things that people are, turning to that lifestyle for, is because houses are insane, and, college and all this debt people carry around, like that all is, that's a burden in its own right.
Yeah. And living in a van isn't necessarily cheaper than living in a house, depending on your van and depending on your travel styles. Gas is so expensive. And vans get great gas mileage for a house, but terrible gas mileage for a car. And it every time I fill up my van, it takes me more than $100.
Oh, wow.
And so when I was doing my long haul trips and I'm driving, from Colorado to Washington, I'm spending $100 at least once a day to fill up my tank.
Right.
Because $100 in gas will get me about 450 miles.
Yeah. And so that's one of the practical things that I feel like is so important. So if anybody's really interested in this, they need to find you, right? And so I know everybody, of course,
I'll talk all day about the logistics.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to link to your website, which is hollypriestley.com, hollycpriestley.com.
Yep.
And then they can find stuff like that, because that's important, right? I feel like a lot of people, they see this glorified version of what that would look like, which is waking up, every time I want to see, like, if I see van life pictures, I need to see the frame of the back window of the van to like, put it, not even how beautiful it is. It's that you're there and you can see that,
Yeah.
So I feel like people should really find your resources, your podcast, your website, read your blog, and understand a little bit more about what that truly means, so they can, get like the real feel for it.
Yeah. And I offer coaching sessions too, one-on-one. So if you have like specific questions, I helped a client last year who was building out her van. And our first conversation was all logistics. Like, how much water do I need? What should I build here, there, and the other thing? And, a year later, she's been living in her van for a few months. And now we're talking about, the mindset of this, that, and the other thing. And like, we very quickly shifted from, here are my logistical recommendations. And a lot of it will come, like, I did my van my way, but I'm going to help you figure out how to do your van your way.
Right.
But then van life is like, it's a lifestyle, but it will when you're living in 60 square feet with just yourself, you come face to face with yourself and your issues. And, I'm here for those too.
Right. Yeah. And that's great, because you can't, like, I think a lot of people might approach that sort of a lifestyle as a mechanism of kind of running away from some of the things that are bothering you about your daily life. But really, when you then close yourself into a small space and you have pure silence around you, you're going to need to those things are not going to go away until.
Oh yeah. And I will talk about that all day. And I will laugh about it all day.
We're all trying to figure it out. This is so awesome. Holly, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Again, hollycpriestley.com. And of course, you can find Healthy Women Leaders at healthywomenleaders.com. I'll put all the links in the description below. And I wish everybody a wonderful and healthy day.
Awesome. Thanks.